It's on.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Are we on, Sabrina? Tamo online?
Yes.
So I will kindly ask for all the panelists to open your windows. Welcome attendees to our webinar on social science and policy in the context of academic careers. It is my honor to host you for an insightful journey in this next couple of hours. I am Leopoldo Gerhardinger, a social oceanographer myself with Autonomous University of Barcelona and counselor for Ocean Social Science and Policy for the Oceanography Society. Please look for the interpretation, the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select the language you may want to hear, those of you in the Zoom call with us here. Por favor, veja o ícone de interpretação, um globo, embaixo da sua tela e selecione o idioma que você quer ouvir aqui para os participantes dentro da nossa sala do Zoom. So I'll briefly introduce this amazing panel and that we have gathered here today. Welcome all panelists, commentators, the reporters, and co-hosts. Thank you for your enthusiasm and smooth engagement throughout the pre-production of this webinar. Thank you, members of the Brazilian Future Ocean Panel, for your kind hosting support and the careful consideration of all technicalities during our session today. Please let us also welcome our interpreter, Fernanda Felix, the PhD in Letters with Federal University of Paraná. She's a professional translator, interpreter, and language reviewer. Thanks so much for helping us advance this multicultural dialogue. And on behalf of the production team, I'd also like to acknowledge the invaluable support of all webinar supporting organizations. And the idea for this webinar came out of early discussions with the Oceanography Society membership in the past years, and with colleagues in Brazil advancing social environmental oceanography in formal curricula in Brazil. Beyond oceanography, we are also increasingly realizing the value of various disciplines interacting with the human and institutional dimensions of ocean affairs in academic circles, but also with much relevance to ocean policy making. Okay, I'll put my slides on so we can see the scope of our discussion today. Please, the panelists and commentators, you may turn off your cameras now. So today, the scope of our webinar will range from, we will explore the interface of ocean science with social sciences and humanities in the global south and north to identify common and contextual challenges and opportunities faced and ways forward. We will showcase regional debates and progress in social oceanography and marine social science more broadly, including insights into ocean research, extension, education, and policy making. During and after our webinar, the volunteers, reporters from Oceano Avista NGO will help us prepare a follow-up report, which will be shared with all registered attendees shortly after the webinar next week. We also want to build linkages between like-minded early career and senior researchers and practitioners here in the call, especially the panelists and commentators working in fields of marine social science and social oceanography. So I have here from the registrants list that we got over 200 participants. Let's hope most can make it, either on the room, Zoom, or online in the transmission. But many people from Brazil registered, but also from European, North American countries, Central America, Africa, and Asia. So we have decided during the pre-production phase that we would have 3 guiding questions that were shared with everyone here on board. So what the current levels of experience and training of marine scientists with the humanities has been sufficient to build an oceanographic science and practice aligned with a humanist culture. The second question is how to improve marine scientists formal at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Training and professional experience in social science, in the humanities, and policy research and practice throughout their careers. And finally, in which ways such training and experience matters for the implementation of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So let's get started. I asked the panelists, both Emma and Gustavo, to show up their smiley faces, if you will. Let's see here. Emma and Gustavo, are you there? Okay, so let's, hi.
Posso começar assim.
Great, thank you, Gustavo. So we will start with 2 panels, 20 minutes each. Gustavo Moura from Federal University of Pará, Brazil. He's working on decolonial coastal management, marine ethnoecology and artisanal fisheries with Federal University of Pará. Gustavo is a precursor of social environmental oceanography in Brazil and has, with me, initiated the structuration of this webinar. So he will be speaking in Portuguese. So those of you, please enable the interpretation button for English. Gustavo, the floor is yours.
Olá, bom dia a todos, a todas e a todes. Sejam todos muito bem-vindos. Muito obrigado, Léo, pela introdução. Bom, além dos agradecimentos, né, que o Léo já fez, eu queria agradecer, inclusive, a ele mesmo, né, pela iniciativa. A ideia desse evento foi dele e pela parceria dele na organização desse evento. É a primeira vez, né, que a gente organiza algo juntos, e claro, junto com todas as instituições que ele já mencionou, que ele já agradeceu. E eu acho que a grandeza desse evento já mostra o que podemos fazer juntos se a gente começar a trabalhar mais junto, de forma mais programática. Que seja esse só um dos primeiros, né? o primeiro evento que a gente trabalhe junto, que a gente coopere para organizar o evento ou outras coisas juntos também. Então, muito obrigado, Léo, pela introdução. Eu tenho aí o desafio de, em 20 minutos, lançar algumas provocações para a discussão do tema deste webinário, uma perspectiva de uma nova oceanografia, que tem surgido a partir de uma perspectiva desde o sul global, a partir do sul global, que tem sido chamada aqui no Brasil de oceanografia socioambiental, e nos demais países das Américas como oceanografia social. As qualificações social ou socioambiental, elas decorrem que essa nova oceanografia ela se alinha ao ecologismo social, vertente de proteção da natureza, que surge no processo de luta por justiça e pela defesa das florestas, com o movimento chípico, em 1973 na Índia, e em 1976 com o movimento seringueiros na Amazônia brasileira. Nos Estados Unidos, esses movimentos de resistência semelhantes irão ocorrer na década de 1980, denunciando o racismo ambiental, sobretudo no ambiente urbano. Aqui no Brasil, essa vertente ela vai ganhar particularidades no que se convencionou chamar de socioambientalismo, e que consideramos um dos movimentos de descolonização do ser, do poder, do saber e da natureza. Com esse alinhamento, as lutas por justiça socioambiental, que nos exige um giro decolonial, funde-se uma oceanografia cidadã, que, como veremos um pouquinho mais adiante aqui, é muito distinta do que convencionamos chamar de oceanografia clássica, que é aquela que surgiu no norte global e que foi exportada mundo afora, ganhando lógicas singulares entre os países e dentro dos próprios países, fundando escolas próprias nesses países. Bom, os princípios éticos e o reconhecimento da oceanografia clássica enquanto uma das instituições sociais responsáveis por transformar a zona costeira em uma zona de contato de caráter colonial estão publicados na Carta Compromisso, firmada no primeiro webinário de oceanografia socioambiental que ocorreu no ano de 2020, publicado na revista Mares. Alguns têm definido essa oceanografia socioambiental, ou melhor dizendo, a banalizado, criando um senso comum conveniente de que essa oceanografia seria uma suposta área da oceanografia, que é a oceanografia socioambiental, seria uma suposta área da oceanografia onde esta estaria circunscrita à pesquisa sobre seres humanos e ou onde se tem feito diálogo com as ciências humanas e sociais aplicadas. A primeira questão que vamos colocar aqui, de forma muito categórica, inclusive, é que esse senso comum é uma falácia conveniente que esconde os diálogos que a oceanografia tem feito com as ciências econômicas de viés liberal, com a história ambiental e a ecológica, e com a antropologia evolucionista, só para citar alguns exemplos, e que se desdobram em convenções, em concepções de desenvolvimento, de democracia, de participação, de gestão, de grupos sociais e de sociedade. Aqui nós temos uma questão-chave. Há uma estrutura, então, paradigmática em que esses diálogos eles ocorrem, em um espaço de produção de conhecimentos oceanográficos que a gente pode elencar em 5 eixos. O primeiro desses eixos, e aí a gente vai por um caminho de mostrar por onde parte a crítica à oceanografia clássica, que eu acho que vai lançar alguns elementos importantes para a gente poder definir a questão da cultura humanística na oceanografia. E aí, depois, eu acho que um pouco mais no final, ali nas considerações finais, eu acho que eu consigo lançar mais alguns elementos do que seria essa nova oceanografia. Então, eu vou, nesse primeiro momento, ficar restrito mais a essa estrutura paradigmática como um diagnóstico dos problemas que a gente consegue vislumbrar na oceanografia clássica. Então, na verdade, são 5 eixos que a gente identifica na oceanografia clássica, 5 eixos, 5 estruturas paradigmáticas da oceanografia clássica. O oceanocentrismo, a tragédia dos oceanos, o totalitarismo epistêmico, o monocromatismo cultural nos mares e também um último, né, que ainda não sei bem como chamar especificamente no caso da oceanografia, porque eu acabei identificando essa semana ao preparar essa fala, que seria a questão do machismo estrutural nas instituições de oceanografia também. Eu achava que não havia sido nada publicado nesse sentido ainda, mas buscando alguns trabalhos de história da oceanografia, a gente viu que já existem alguns elementos de discussão e que a gente vai ter que passar aqui de forma muito breve. Bom, o primeiro item, o oceanocentrismo, ele seria a consolidação, né, no século XX, da extensão da ética selvagem ou do biocentrismo preservacionista do espaço terrestre para o espaço marinho. A figura do William Beebe, ela vai ser central na produção de espaço marinho de natureza selvagem, tal como o Ralph Waldo Emerson, o Henry Thoreau e o John Muir fizeram para o espaço terrestre. O oceano ele vai passar, então, a ser colocado dentro do arcabouço de paisagens sublimes, criando-se uma ideia de oceano sublime, né? Este explorador dos mares do século XX é um dos responsáveis pela difusão da ideia de que o oceano afeta a vida de todos os seres humanos de forma imprevisível e é também onipresente. Essa ideia ela vai ser reforçada e vai ser ampliada por Rachel Carson e Eugene Clark nas suas respectivas obras O Oceano em Torno de Nós e A Mulher com Arpão, se a gente for traduzir literalmente para o português, né? Como nessas obras, né? Então vai ser reforçada, né, e ampliada essa ideia como um oceano todo poderoso, amável, dócil, belo, extraordinário e sublime. Esse tipo de representação do espaço marinho também é amplamente difundido por Jacques Cousteau e se encontra atualmente, inclusive, materializada no kit pedagógico de cultura oceânica para todos da ONU. Como extensão do centrismo, né, preservacionista no espaço marinho, vale destacar a influência do romantismo de Jean-Jacques Rousseau e da filosofia transcendentalista norte-americana na produção do espaço oceanográfico. O outro item, né, seria a tragédia dos oceanos. Esse item eu considero ele um pouco mais complexo e cheio de elementos. A gente, infelizmente, não vai poder tocar em todos, e aqui eu elenquei, na verdade, 3 principais questões a ser elencadas nessa tragicomédia dos oceanos, né? Além da gente pontuar que o paradigma hardiniano, né, invisibiliza as regras tradicionais de uso de recursos naturais, né, a gente vai, então, mencionar mais 3 itens. O primeiro deles, que já é mais discutido na literatura científica, é que esse paradigma hardiniano ele projeta no outro uma mentalidade empresarial capitalista impossível de existir na Idade Medieval, né, nos pastores da Idade Medieval, que ele diz lá na parábola dele, já que o capitalismo ele surge na modernidade, não na Idade Média. E isso faz a partir de concepções, inclusive, da economia clássica, contidas nos modelos de Gordon Schaffer, nos modelos microeconômicos de pesca de Gordon Schaffer, que ele cita explicitamente, inclusive, nos seus trabalhos, né? Ele transpõe, então, os 4 processos, as 4 fases, né, para pescador de Gordon Schaffer, para a questão dos pastores da Idade Medieval. A segunda questão, né, e eu não entendo a parca exploração disso na literatura científica, porque é muito grave, é a base da recomendação para privatizar ou estatizar os recursos para evitar a tragédia dos comuns. Na verdade, segundo ele, os biologicamente mais aptos teriam o direito legal de serem guardiões da propriedade do poder, né? Ele vai sustentar, então, as suas teses nas teorias da hereditariedade e evolução, né? Ele defende uma ação, inclusive, diferencial entre os grupos sociais típica do fascismo do apartheid social. Poder, propriedade e livre mercado para aqueles biologicamente mais aptos, e ele vai criticar o estado de bem-estar social e a Declaração Universal dos Direitos Humanos, inclusive a própria autonomia reprodutiva, né, daqueles considerados materialmente mais pobres. O estado de bem-estar social e os direitos humanos, ele prejudicariam, segundo Hard, a seleção natural. Então, Hard, ele amplia, na verdade, um discurso eugênico até então aplicado ao proletariado urbano, né, e a imigrantes para a discussão do ambientalismo moderno. Na verdade, a máxima de Harding ela seria menos cínica se fosse formulada da seguinte forma: a liberdade de todos no uso dos recursos comuns provoca a ruína dos biologicamente mais aptos. Essa deveria, na verdade, ter sido a máxima de Harding, e não que a liberdade leva à ruína de todos. Aqui ele explicitaria melhor o que ele gostaria de dizer. A terceira questão é a estereotipificação, né, de pescadores artesanais que vai surgir em consequência do paradigma hardiniano. Um artigo do The Economist, por exemplo, de 1994, intitulado A Tragédia dos Oceanos, ela vai caracterizar os pescadores como egoístas, insensatos, belicosos e a última raça de caçadores-coletores, né? Tendo bem subjacente aí neste último caso a ideia de evolução linear, unilinear, né, na verdade, de caça e coleta, pastoralismo seria a fase seguinte, agricultura a fase seguinte, comércio, indústria a última fase, né? E aí estando os pescadores na base dessa evolução social linear, né? Tal como a história natural e a antropologia fizeram nos séculos XVIII, XIX e nos princípios do século XX. Em artigos de oceanógrafos do Brasil, nós ainda encontramos algumas outras qualificações, né, como isolados, competitivos, autodestruidores, destruidores do ambiente, criadores de câmaras de gás para recursos pesqueiros e ignorantes. Eu vou parar aqui com as qualificações, porque elas não acabaram, a gente encontra outras, mas o que está acabando, na verdade, é meu tempo para falar, então eu vou passar para o item seguinte. O outro eixo paradigmático seria o que a gente chama de totalitarismo epistêmico, né? Essa seria a crença dos adeptos da vertente positivo-reducionista da ciência moderna, de que ela seria uma forma superior, se não a única válida de conhecimento, que é capaz de ordenar os fenômenos naturais, por ser a única que atende critérios de validade de conhecimento, como neutralidade, por exemplo, objetividade, universalidade, etc., né, desconsiderando todos os outros modos de conhecimento não ocidentais. Particularmente, a oceanografia, ela acredita-se como superior, inclusive, entre todos os outros demais modos de conhecimento científico sobre os mares. Como resultado, tende-se uma produção ativa de apagamentos de outros modos de saber, e produz-se, né, e ela se autoproduz como uma monocultura dos mares, né? Um dos sintomas disso, existem vários, mas um bem presente em nível internacional hoje, é também, como eu já citei, como exemplo de expressão de paradigmas de eixos anteriores, o kit pedagógico Cultura Oceânica para Todos, da ONU, né? Lá nesse kit pedagógico, ele é produzido por uma comissão oceanográfica intergovernamental, né, e propõe uma cultura oceânica no singular, não existem outras, que é sinônimo de conhecimentos oceanográficos que deve ser transferida para todos, se colocando, inclusive, em macro tendências da educação ambiental identificadas aqui no Brasil como duas, a conservacionista e a pragmática, né, ligadas, respectivamente, à mudança de comportamento individual e à hegemonia da economia clássica, neoclássica, não discutindo problemas estruturais, por exemplo, e nem visibilizando isso nas suas ações de educação ambiental. Então, não é nada, na verdade, nesse kit sobre conhecimentos não ocidentais ou sobre outras culturas marítimas, inclusive aquelas mesmas que se fundam dentro do marco da racionalidade científica ocidental. Ainda se justifica a necessidade do kit, né, desses trabalhos da década dos oceanos, da expansão dessa cultura oceânica para todos, a partir de uma suposta existência de um público com cegueira oceânica. Aí a pergunta que eu deixo aqui no ar, só para complementar as perguntas que o Léo já deixou. De quem é a cegueira, afinal de contas? O outro eixo que a gente teria para comentar aqui, e aí para a gente já chegando já nas partes mais finais, né, dessa fala, seria o monocromatismo cultural dos mares, né? Eu acho que é meio óbvio, no caso, que uma ciência hardiniana, como visto acima, eurocentrada, né, e estrutura um espaço com racialização e discriminação de grupos sociais, como povos indígenas, quilombolas e de pessoas pretas, né? Mas eu posso citar, né, se prefere que cite um caso, é o caso de invisibilização de povos indígenas e quilombolas que praticam a pesca num dos estados do Brasil, o estado do Rio Grande do Sul, que mais se acreditam próximos aos europeus. O outro, o machismo estrutural, esse, na verdade, eu acabei descobrindo, né, que já tem algumas coisas essa semana, como eu coloquei anteriormente, né, que em alguns trabalhos da história da oceanografia, da Vadovsky e do Roger Revelli, que tem nos mostrado que um dos mitos de origem da oceanografia, a viagem do Challenge, é resultado da fusão de duas culturas extremamente machistas, né, a cultura naval e a cultura científica do século XIX. Né? E a função dessas duas culturas machistas vai estruturar instituições governamentais e científicas de oceanografia que vão subestimar e invisibilizar mulheres pesquisadoras deste campo do conhecimento ao longo da história. Né? E um dos casos que eles vão analisar é a invisibilização da pesquisadora Mary Sears, né, que pesquisa fundo oceânico. Bom, esses eixos, e aí finalizando, concluindo, que eu já estou, né, no meu tempo, que estruturam esse espaço etnocenográfico, eles expressam o que eu tenho chamado de síndrome de Poseidon. Se pensa que se vê o outro e o mundo de um ponto de vista marinho, do fundo do mar para fora. Um ponto de vista meio embaçado, ondulado, difuso, fragmentado, de um pária social, né, que sintetiza características do que se considera as piores mazelas da sociedade. Eu creio que, nesse caso, a gente está, mais uma vez, diante do exemplo emblemático do grotesco romântico em uma tensão dramática entre o sujeito e o seu duplo. Esse alienígena social, esse pária social, né, que é tão visibilizado no outro, né, na oceanografia clássica, é a projeção, na verdade, de seus próprios males, tal como na tragédia neoprometeica, ou, se preferirem chamar assim, de uma tragicomédia prometeica, do Victor Frankenstein, onde criador e criatura se confundem. O criador, embora se pense no fundo do mar, está em terra, olhando a sua própria imagem no espelho d'água, uma imagem que ele próprio rejeita e recalca. Na verdade, seria como se fosse um narciso com problemas de autoimagem. É isso. Muito obrigado. E o que eu tinha para falar seria isso daí. Eu fico no aguardo das contribuições de vocês para fazer o apanhado final. Obrigado, Léo.
Obrigado, Gustavo. Thank you, Gustavo, for such a rich and broad perspective to kickstart our webinar. I am eager to read your minutes because also there are a lot of information, references to interesting researchers, and that we can deepen our understanding of this marine social science field. And remembering that we will be sharing a report of this webinar soon, and hopefully with the minutes and references Gustavo have brought forward. So to continue our panel, second panel with Dr. Emma McKinley. You may turn on your camera, Emma. You're around. Hello. Emma is from Cardiff University and a lead of the Marine Social Science Network. She's a chair of the MSSN, as it is called. Currently a research fellow with University of Cardiff in Wales. Her research areas of interest include societal interactions with marine and coastal environments, marine spatial planning, ecosystem management, and ecosystem services. She's understanding the public connections with our oceans in marine policy, with coastal community sustainability, regeneration, and blue growth. Welcome on board, Emma. The floor is yours. And if you have some slides to share, please just do so.
I do. Give me 1 second. Oh, I'm not able to share my screen.
I think Sabrina pode dar uma ajuda ali.
Hey. You see my slides?
Sim, estamos bem.
Okay, great. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you, Gustavo, for such a challenging and provocative opening. I think it was really important to explore those theoretical underpinnings of where this emerging area of marine social sciences and social environmental oceanography have come from, and the origins of these discussions. So thank you for that, for kicking that off. And thank you so much, Leo, for the invitation to be here with you all today. I'm going to try to speak very slowly because I do have a tendency to speak quickly. So please, Fernanda, if you need me to slow down, just let me know. So I am taking a slightly different perspective on today's topics, and will probably say things that conflict with what Gustavo has said, or maybe not conflict, but look at it from, as I said, a different viewpoint. As Leo said, I'm based at Cardiff University, and my research is very much around the relationships between people and the ocean, and very much situated in my own research within the global north context. So there are differences in how we have perhaps explored and addressed these issues of marine social sciences and marine social research. And I guess the first thing to say is that, of course, for many of us, especially those of us who work with the ocean, the connection to the ocean, the connection between people and the ocean, sea and coast is obvious. It's there. We have that connection, whether it's through a love of our science, whether it's through an emotional connection, whether it's just through recognizing that the ocean has provided an avenue for trade and transport and connecting people for generations. But historically, and perhaps it's important to recognize some of what Gustavo said, that in a number of European, in the global north context, some of that connection, that recognition of the everyday role of the ocean has been lost. And for me, this quote by Rose George in her book Deep Sea and Foreign Going really captures that maybe lack of everyday understanding that some people, and not everybody and not every community, but some people have with the ocean. And she describes the fact that there are no ordinary citizens to witness the workings of an industry, and she's talking about the port and the shipping industry. And particularly for somewhere like the UK, where we are an island, everything we get pretty much comes by ship. The ocean is absolutely fundamental and crucial to the everyday workings of our society. And yet that is not the case in terms of how we make decisions, how our policies are made. There is, I can say with a reasonable amount of certainty, a level of ocean blindness, as Gustavo described it. And so Rose, sorry to go back to the quote, Rose says that there are no ordinary citizens to witness the workings of an industry that is one of the most fundamental to their daily existence. Nobody looks beyond their television set, their laptop screens, the cars that sit on their driveways, and thinks about the maritime workers, their safety and security, their rights. We all heard stories of maritime workers who were stuck on boats during the COVID-19 pandemic, about the processes of the bringing of your breakfast cereal to your kitchen table, and what that actually means in terms of the industry and the connection between the ocean and you sitting at home. That place has shrunk in how we connect to it in our everyday lives. So that disconnect in a number of conversations that happen around ocean governance and ocean management in the global north is definitely recognized as being one of those challenges that we're facing. How do we address the issues facing the coast and ocean around the UK, for example, if we don't understand how people are relating to it, if we don't understand whether or not people care about the ocean? And once we have that understanding, how do we foster that caring? How do we engage those people? And Gustavo also mentioned the UN Ocean Decade, which I, of course, absolutely recognise that the institution and the decadal programmes have their weaknesses and have complicated geopolitical histories. Very much from a personal level, for me as a marine social researcher, the Ocean Decade offered an opportunity because there is this clear, explicit recognition, from my perspective, of an expanded definition of what ocean science is. A move perhaps away from that Western academic understanding of the ocean. It's early days. I don't think we're there yet, but I think there's an aspiration for that broadening out of that ocean science definition to better include natural and social sciences. For me, I also think we absolutely need to include arts and humanities scholars in that discourse as well. And also bringing and centering local and indigenous knowledge, but knowledges. I like that Gustavo really highlighted this idea of a singularity. And it's really important that we recognize that there is not one knowledge, there is not one way of knowing or integrating or connecting with the ocean. So knowledge is very important. And thinking about how that is better integrated and better considered in a way that is socially equitable and balanced, and all of those very important topics that Gustavo mentioned in his opening talk. For me also, given the focus of my research, one of the other positives is this call for a transformed relationship between society and the ocean. And again, I will caveat that by saying that not every relationship needs to be transformed. Not every community needs that transformation, but centering that as part of these ambitions and putting people into this conversation at a UN Ocean Decade level, for me to raise the profile of marine social research and to think about how it can be better integrated into decision making was a real positive and a good real bonus. It also centers this idea of ocean literacy, and I could do a whole other talk on the issues with the phrase ocean literacy and its origins, and how it has needed to evolve. And that is another talk I do, and I can talk to anybody about that if you would like me to. But again, what I think is important to highlight about this positioning of ocean literacy as a potential mechanism for change is that although it originated 20 years ago as a very Western marine education framework, and Gustavo mentioned, I think that's what you were referring to, for the ocean literacy with all program and the toolkit, there has, I would like to hope, been a real evolution in the discussion around ocean literacy in recent years. And if we look at its very simplest definition, all it means is an understanding of the ocean's influence on you and your influence on the ocean. And yes, historically, it has been underpinned by these 7 principles that you can see on the screen, which are very oceanographic in their nature. They're very sciencey in their nature. But if we actually look at the core definition, that could mean so many different things. Understanding how you relate to the ocean and how it affects and impacts you. That means so many different things to so many different people, different communities, different institutions. And that's where I draw a lot from my own work. For me, this image from the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition really highlights the importance of recognizing that diversity of interpretation of what ocean literacy and all of those different constructs, what they actually mean in real life to the people, to the communities in these regions. And this is a Canadian example. And one of the challenges with ocean literacy is the actual translation of that term. To me, literacy means reading and writing. But when I think of connecting to the ocean, that's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how I feel about the ocean, why it matters to me, why in my memories, my connections, of course, my job, but it's more than my scientific understanding of the ocean. And I think this word cloud really captures that multi-dimensional relationship. So you see things like ocean relationships, you see ocean stories, ocean equity, ocean continuum. So it's not a one-time thing. It's a process, a continuum. Ocean stewardship, protection, outreach. It's also worth noting that there are responses in French and also in the Nunatsiavut and Inuit languages as well, really highlighting the importance of recognizing that ocean literacy does not translate easily and will not fit necessarily outside academic structures. But for me, I draw positives that there has been an evolution in that conversation in the last 20 years. And I think we're at an early stage in the ocean decade. I am an optimist. I am a positive outlook person. So I am hopeful that there is an opportunity for us to further explore some of the very important topics that Gustavo mentioned and think about how we can really ensure that we do better and that the ocean decade does better. And that ocean literacy can actually be for all, and it recognizes that there are these different values and knowledges, and they are all valid and equal, or of equal importance. So I'm going to move on a little bit to talk more about marine social sciences generally and some of the key themes that we have identified in some of our research. Ocean literacy really sits quite firmly within the marine social sciences. And in the last 15 years or so, there's been a very strong emergence of this as a group of disciplines. And I am not in any way saying that this research and this work wasn't happening before, but the discussion and the presence of marine social research, for me, personally has definitely changed. When I started my PhD 15 years ago on marine citizenship, people asked me, what, fish being the citizens of the sea? No, that's not what I meant. And of course, fish are citizens of the sea. That's a whole other topic. But that has really changed in the last 15 years. And there's been much more focus on trying to explore these relationships that people have in different contexts, in different places. And it draws, when we talk about marine social sciences, I said earlier, I think for me, it's about just understanding people, humanities, social relationships, whether that's drawing on arts, on heritage, on culture, whether it's exploring topics related to sea or ocean blindness, whether it's policy and governance, management. It's all about that complex relationship between how we as humans interact with and use our ocean and coasts and seas, and how we better manage those, or how we can manage those for sustainable ocean futures. Increasingly, we're seeing the marine social science or marine social research toolbox expand and move away from, or I'd like to think we're moving away from purely quantitative understandings of relationships, and we're trying to embrace qualitative and arts-based methods that allow us to explore those intricacies and complexities in ways that we maybe haven't done in the past. And even when we have done them, where we haven't been able to maybe embed that evidence and that knowledge into decision making. So how can we use this evidence? How can we put this into the decisions, the governance, the management that we make for our ocean? Because everybody listening to this call right now, all of you, all of the people represented in these images, and these are from different places in the world, these are from places that are inland. The aquarium is in New Orleans, so based in a river. The fishing boat is off the coast of Borneo. The top center is South Africa. There is a range of different images. Everybody has a different relationship with the ocean. Our experiences, our values, our livelihoods, whether we went to the coast on holidays with our grandparents, whether our parents were fishers, whatever that is, all of that will influence our relationships and how we value and treat and expect our oceans to be managed. And so there's no one size fits all. We are not a homogenous group, and how we understand those relationships cannot therefore be homogenous. And one of the things I always like to try to challenge a little bit is who gets to be a coastal community? So you see the image from the aquarium in New Orleans. That's quite far inland when you're there. It doesn't feel like you're by the coast. Of course, it's very affected by the ocean, but it doesn't feel coastal. So who gets to be part of these discussions? Who gets to have a voice? And I know Gustavo mentioned that in relation to excluded communities and lack of proper inclusion of Indigenous communities in the past. And I think those questions are very much still relevant and important for us to discuss. So there are challenges. There are challenges that although we have started to increase, I guess, the level of marine social research that happens, at least here in the UK, and this is a very UK kind of focus kind of part for me, we have this issue with how we bring that science and that policy together. And there are some key challenges. So there has been, we did some work a couple of years ago where we identified a lack of understanding of the marine social science methods and how they could be applied within policy making and decision making. Common language that meant that those of us working in interdisciplinary teams could understand each other, that we didn't know what different methods were. But there was a lack of intuitive fit with the data, the evidence, the results from marine social research within our existing decision making and governance structures. They don't fit into the policy box. We didn't have a lot of data at a national scale, and that's changing. We've had 2 national studies over the last couple of years that are helping us to understand where we're at in terms of ocean connections across the UK. But all of this means we have to challenge our existing ways of thinking and challenge the cultural and social norms of our institutions, of our science, and start to kind of expand that and think about how we can work more collaboratively together, as Gustavo said. This was further explored a little bit on a global scale with some colleagues of mine. We recently published a paper in iScience with colleagues Rachel Kelly, Mary McKay, Rebecca Shellick, and Chris, I can never say Chris's surname, Cvetanovic, and Ingrid Van Putten, all based in Australia. And we were trying to do a horizon scan of marine social science research priorities at a global scale, but also what are the existing challenges, the barriers, what are future priority areas? It's of note, so we had 106 respondents, 64% were early career researchers, 68% from academia, so definitely seeing some biases there. And crucially, there were 69% from the global north. So this is not a globally representative study, and we're very conscious of that, and it is definitely something that we need to explore in the future. But we hope that it gave us a little bit of an insight into what might need to happen next to support an ongoing marine social research and science community. So one recommendation was to support development of a transdisciplinary research agenda that could respond to global priorities. And really what that means is ensuring that marine social research and social oceanography is positioned alongside natural and physical science research, that it's part of that decision making and that problem solving, so that we can address the challenges facing our global ocean. Part of that is ensuring there is integrated inter and transdisciplinary funding. So I think we need to think beyond interdisciplinarity and think, how do we engage those who haven't been able or haven't had a voice in these discussions? How can we work towards transdisciplinarity, engaging with businesses, with communities, with all actors? At a policy scale, how do we develop effective pathways for impact? How can we ensure that there are ways, meaningful ways of getting this evidence into how we make decisions? And then there were some recommendations that came from the group we surveyed around capacity building, ongoing work to enhance the reputation of marine social research and to enhance the capacity of marine social sciences. I'm aware I'm running out of time, but I just wanted to flag 2 groups to you. The first is the Global Ocean Literacy Research community. Again, it uses that word, ocean literacy, but I really hate for that to put you off. If you are somebody who is involved in marine education and different ways of knowing and engaging communities in the ocean, or you have some expertise or some amazing ideas, I'd really love you to get in touch and feed into this program, because we're very aware and very conscious of ensuring that this expands that toolkit that Gustavo mentioned, and that we start to think beyond those Western and academic ways of knowing the ocean. I also wanted to flag the Marine Social Science Network to those of you who maybe aren't aware. We have a monthly newsletter. We have a very active Twitter page. We have webinars. We have a lovely book club. I'd love for those of you who maybe aren't involved to get involved and share your research, share your own science. It would be really great to have that input from you. And the newsletter goes out to about 1,000 people. So if you ever have any papers or studies that you wanted to promote, please just let me know and I'd be very happy to share those. And just because I know I've run over, I'm going to just finish on this slide, which just is a quote from Elliot Norse, and I think captures the importance of these conversations. So my marine biology classes had really helped, but in hindsight, I wish I had taken appropriate training in psychology, sociology, economics, political science. So really showing that, of course, the passion for what we do, the passion for the ocean is why we're here. But to really deliver that change, we need to understand not only people, but our institutions. We need to challenge our existing institutions, challenge those decision-making processes so that we can improve them, so we can work towards the sustainable ocean futures that I mentioned at the beginning. Thank you. I'm sorry, Leo, for running over slightly. I couldn't see you on my screen, so I hope that wasn't too bad. And thank you again for the invitation. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Emma, for the brilliant intervention and thought-provoking range of concepts and information that you brought. I saw already in the chat box people asking for your papers. I'm remembering that we will compile a report and follow up with all participants so we can all be on the same page and in continued dialogue. Thank you, Emma. I kindly invite then all commentators to turn on your camera so we can now see your faces. Yeah, can we see? Let's see here, gallery. Yeah. So it's I'm honored to welcome you all on this call and making our morning shine a bit more in Brazil. So I'll briefly go through some of the experience here in the room. So Karina is working on ocean law and currently co-hosting a federal government advisory working group on ocean humanities to propose advancements in graduate and postgraduate programs in Brazil. And then we have Debbie, she's working to improve higher level education and public policies on oceans with National Agricultural University in Honduras. We have Nemer on board, who's working on social oceanography, marine anthropology, and ethnobiology with El Colegio de Michoacán in Mexico. And we have André, who's working on intersectional studies, including ocean archaeology, history, and policy, with Autonomous University of Barcelona, Project Tradition, with Institute of Environmental Science and Technology. Then we have Noelani, who's working on coastal ecosystems, cultural geography, knowledge co-production, and seascapes with Hawaiian School of Hawaiian Knowledge, Hawaii Ki Nuakea. You can spell that later for us properly. Patrick Christie, my friend, working on social justice and sustainability. He's a precursor of marine-related peer-to-peer learning networks approach in several ocean regions, and he's with the University of Washington in Seattle. We have Christine. She's working on intersectional studies concerning coastal and marine common pool resources and artisanal fisheries. with the University of Maine in USA. And finally, Michelle, who will take the floor first. She's a cultural anthropologist working with science, communication, and environmental history. She's a Mexican who recently joined Stanford University in the Hopkins Marine Stations. So with that, I ask you to kindly turn off your cameras, and we'll have the floor with Michelle, who start answering her fresh thoughts, both on the panels that we just heard, but also on the three main guiding questions of the webinar. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Bom dia. Não falo português, so falo portunhol. Voy a falar en inglés. But thank you everyone for the invitation. And thank you to the two very excellent talks this morning, very thought-provoking. I'm kind of in a bad position because I'm first and I don't know where to start. But I think a good place to start is looking at the interface of what brings us here today, integrating social science and oceanography, and how we can advance in this very large task of trying to build a new field, which is an enormous and very exciting challenge. In my case, my training is both in anthropology and in marine science, and I think one of the very large challenges in doing transdisciplinary work, at least in an academic context, is trying to justify to natural sciences that other types of knowledge are important and worthwhile and worth looking into. And from that perspective, aiming to decolonize in a sense of saying, okay, there are other ways of understanding the world that are vital, and especially in the face of the challenges that humanity and the planet are changing, that don't have any sort of precedent even in geological history. So I think one big starting point is thinking about, in pragmatic terms, how can we put all these different ways of knowing on equal ground and in a way that are respected by all involved and engaged deeply with all involved. Because certainly I think there is a push from the natural sciences to attempt to integrate social science more, but often from a very pragmatic point of view. And often with a bias of thinking that there's somehow less, and that they somehow require less training or less theoretical engagement, or seen as less, essentially. So I think one big step is trying to create a dialogue with natural sciences where they will see social sciences and humanities with equal worth, and even much more challenging, looking at other ways of knowing in terms of equal value, of being inherently valuable, not only instrumentally valuable, because I think a lot of what we see in terms of incorporating indigenous knowledge or local knowledge is in relation to their utility in regards to the aims of essentially hegemonic forces still, right, in terms of meeting sustainability goals or development goals, which are often defined by institutions or organizations in the global north. So there is certainly a lot of topics which we can discuss here for days and days. And I definitely have a lot of food for thought, a lot of things to digest and think about. And I hope these comments are a good starting place to kick off the rest of the discussion with the other panelists. Thank you.
Hi, I think I'm up next. I don't know if I'm supposed to just jump in.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Leo, for that cue and for organizing this this panel and this event, and to the keynote speakers for your very thought-provoking, interesting talks to get the discussion going, and to you, Michelle, for getting the discussion going as well. So I think that, you know, we've been talking about, you know, the many ways that you know, there has been this sort of growing and now a pretty well-established body of social science and policy research on the human dimensions of oceanography and marine sciences. And we've seen this in the fields of fishery science, resource economics, anthropology, geography, sociology, related disciplines. And especially with the, you know, the rising popularity of management paradigms and shifts towards integrated coastal management, ecosystems-based management, and the very large and continuously growing literature in those areas as well. But this question, I'm really interested in this question of whether a humanistic approach can truly align with oceanographic science. This is, to me, it's a very interesting epistemological question concerning the convergence of different types of knowledges as we've been talking about here, and the convergence of different types of knowledges that may operate on different scales, and in some cases, according to different ontologies or ontological positions. So it raises a question of how to break from the scientific tradition to make space for more interpretive or humanistic or various forms of collaborative research or emancipatory research in these fields that are sort of traditionally grounded in marine science or in scientific traditions such as marine science and oceanography. So this challenge of alignment and convergence of these different knowledges really, I think, would lie within building a mutual understanding and respect for these, different epistemological traditions across disciplines, but also beyond. As Emma was talking about, the importance of transdisciplinary research and engagement with stakeholders, communities beyond our ivory towers. So if we can be deliberate about building bridges to align these discovery-oriented goals, or the subjective stance of the scientific tradition with the more subjective experience and humanistic understanding that we think about in the humanities traditions, then this could be a potentially really interesting way to activate transdisciplinary dialogues that could potentially lead to more ethical or moral engagements with ocean and coastal stewardship. So there's some really exciting areas to pursue in that. And I think that around the world, we're seeing a lot more universities recognize the need to create a campus culture or change, foster different kinds of institutional change to kind of grow some kind of sustainability ethic to confront many of these complex environmental, social justice, and economic challenges of our time. We're seeing, some universities, this means a growing recognition and efforts to transform the curriculum, for example, to create more transdisciplinary graduate programs, undergraduate programs, changes in infrastructure, changes in student life in ways that can help prepare students for active engagement in civic life and in democratic processes that would promote, more environmentally sustainable approaches in social justice. And this shift in both the curriculum and extracurricular activities in both of these areas towards a greater inclusion of diverse knowledge types has direct implications for the workforce of those that are being trained in science and technology, whether they're pursuing careers in institutions or in government organizations or in nonprofit sectors or in the private sector. These students coming out of their programs will be expected to balance this depth of their own disciplinary expertise within the breadth of cross-disciplinary understanding and a transdisciplinary understanding, because they'll be expected to engage in solutions-oriented research with a diverse range of collaborators beyond academia. So it's really up to graduate training programs and undergraduate training programs to equip students with a theoretical foundation that is truly convergent and integrative in terms of the theories and the frameworks and the methodologies and the skill building that's needed to do this kind of work. So I think there are a number of strategies that I've seen among my colleagues here at the University of Maine that come in the form of multi-tiered mentoring, building cohorts, providing space for student support, for student-led initiatives that would allow students to develop these skills and serve as peer leaders in collaborative terms. And these are all the kinds of things that ultimately prepare students for engagement on both local and global levels in this, especially considering in the UN Decade of Ocean Science and Sustainable Development. So I think, given that we have, 3 billion people or so or more that depend on coastal marine areas for their needs, and the fact that we still lack a scientific understanding of cumulative effects of pollution and warming and acidification and some of the challenges surrounding oceans and coasts, this kind of approach that we're talking about in this webinar, I think offers some really exciting ways of moving this conversation forward. All of these challenges really require some creative thinking and novel, innovative approaches to solutions-oriented research, and this intersection between natural science, social science, humanities. It offers some exciting possibilities, and I'm really happy to be part of this conversation and hear what everyone else has to say. So thank you for having me.
Bom dia. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much to everybody, and thanks, Leo, particularly for the invitation. So I'm going to try to focus my comments on new comments. There's been many important remarks already made, so I'm going to try to not repeat them. So I would like to start by saying that I having been working in this realm for a couple of decades now, it suggests that the work in this arena is actually getting much better. There are issues and problems and barriers, but I particularly see young scholars leading the way, which is very common in the scholarship and even the practical world, that it's the young scholars, the young practitioners that are really sort of demanding change. Particularly in institutions that I've worked with, I see the emergence increasingly on justice, in the United States, as well as in Brazil and other countries. The rise of authoritarian regimes has really fostered a particular focus on justice matters, environmental justice, climate justice, and students are really in the vanguard of demanding change in their academic institutions. One of the things that I find interesting is that, I believe personally that biophysical scientists, to quote, I saw Elliot Norris, and I know Elliot pretty well, I think that many of them recognize the limitations of their own scholarship and their own training. And it's our role to be humble, to provide sort of support for them in their own journey, and to realize that sometimes while they can be reticent or pushing away social sciences or humanities, that frequently it's rather just ignorance on their part. But I also must say that some of the problems come from the humanities and the social sciences. Many social scientists, for example, are reluctant to work in a meaningful way with natural scientists. They sort of view them as the enemy, if you will. And I see this in zero-sum sorts of thinking frequently in faculty meetings and university discussions, and even within research projects, that there's a sort of belief, particularly this was part of the postmodernist movement within social sciences, was to always focus only on the critique without sort of willingness to build bridges. And so part of my job also is not only to sort of critique the natural or biophysical scientists, but also to some degree critique ourselves and say, what is it about social scientists that have sort of seen the natural sciences as potentially the enemy or the ignorant? I would like the elder statesmen in the social sciences and biophysical sciences to really offer the opportunity for their students to chart their own course, to realize that our training maybe not be the same as the training that is demanded at this particular moment. We need to remain curious about how we can change. I particularly, and Leopoldo and others have been really focused on the interest in learning networks, which is this notion of peer-to-peer learning amongst communities, people who are resource users, but also learning networks can foster engagement with practitioners and scientists. But my point being is that it's about scientists of all ilk being in service of a learning process that they're not in control of. Rather, they're providing their knowledge and expertise, perhaps, in a way that is invited by others who don't have the privilege of scientific training, let's say, or that have their own knowledge systems that is very practical, and that they want to engage in learning from one another without necessarily dependence on scientists. So I would encourage you to read about and learn about learning networks in this seminar. And one thing I would just like to say in summary is that I think students are really demanding change. I see that at the University of Washington. They're demanding that the faculty change. They're demanding that there are new types of faculty. They want new types of students at the university. And so I want the students on this webinar to realize that they have agency. Do not silence yourself. We serve you. So demand change at your institutions. I also think journals, for example, I am the editor-in-chief of the Coastal Management Journal, and journals, it's very practical in the field of academia that you need to publish. And so we at my journal are very interested in publishing the kind of work that are being discussed at this webinar. So I'll stop there at this point. Thank you very much.
Aloha, I'll step in next. I'm Noelani Puniwai. I'm with the Hawaii Nui Akea School of Hawaiian Knowledge, and really honored to be here with you guys today. I have a few points that I want to talk about based on the prompts of the reason, and also in response to the two speakers that joined us today. It was really enlightening to see a little bit of sort of the broader aspects of the social science marine research. I myself was trained as a natural scientist in marine ecology and oceanography, and learning how our ocean is understood by managers. And when I started trying to understand more about how our science is used in management is when I became more and more interested and trained in the social sciences. So I became a scientist originally because I wanted to save the places that I love. Right? I am born and raised in Hawaii. My ancestors have been here for generations. This ocean is where I call home. But as I got further and further into the science fields, I realized that the work that I do isn't actually making a difference in the places that I love. It's not actually helping more people become involved in working in the ocean and entering these spaces of research and academia in the ocean. And so after I finished my PhD, looking at how to integrate different knowledge systems into ocean management, I was offered a position at the University of Hawaii Manoa to work at Hawaii Nui Akea. And Hawaii Nui Akea, the School for Hawaiian Knowledge, is named that because Hawaii Nui Akea is one of our traditional names for all of our people in the Pacific. It is a historical traditional name that many different island groups, Maori, Tahitian, Samoans, they all refer to Hawaii Nui, this big, large ocean. Hawaii Nui is where our people came from. And this word, just this tiny word itself, already opens up a different way of knowing the ocean, right? It expands our idea that this ocean is broad and big, and Hawaii is where our people are from. So using language is one way that I have learned how to just tap into some of the indigenous knowledge that exists about how people interacted with the ocean. And so tapping into this Hawaiian studies realm of understanding the ocean has really gotten me to kind of broaden and understand how the social sciences interact with it. And I love working here because I work with students that have aloha for their ocean, that love their ocean the way I do. And that's why most of us got into this field, right? That's why most of us are in social sciences of the ocean, because we understand that to save and protect and ensure that our oceans are healthy, we need to use the passion that we have for it, the aloha that we each have when we interact in these spaces. And that's a really important time and place for us to be. There's little indigenous faculty that teach in the ocean sciences, even though all our people, especially here in the Pacific, have come from the ocean. So what I teach in my curricula is indigenous ways of understanding the ocean. How do the Hawaiians epistemologically organize the world around them through their language, their creation stories, their taxonomy, the relationships they have. We know that our relationship with the ocean is how we define it. It's how we manage it. And so I talk about how do we do science ethically in Hawaii? And I teach a class on using, through discussions and structured guidance, we explore Hawaiian ethics, implications of research, and decolonizing methodology so that I welcome students who are trained in the traditional sciences to do research in Hawaii and to do it ethically and to do it with decolonial methods and to do it with their whole selves. Because we know that we each experience our world differently, but yet all our interpretations are important in loving this place that we have. So I thank you for letting me join you today. And I think I've used up all my time, but I see this interplay of social and physical oceanography the only way forward in ensuring that we have a healthy future.
All right, good morning, everyone. I think it's my time. My name is Andrea Colomesi. And I have to say those were very good questions. And I don't want to actually repeat what other colleagues have said. That they're great reflections. I'm going to give you my perspective from the past, because I'm an archaeologist, and therefore I belong to humanities, let's say, categorically, and a little bit of social science, but also natural science, because archaeology by nature is extremely multidisciplinary. We have to deal with past societies, and past societies are extremely complex, as the societies today. They had to deal with different, very similar problems that and circumstances that we have to deal in our everyday life. So it's extremely important for me, and it's natural to think that humanities must integrate natural science or other forms of approaching ocean systems in other natural systems or anthropogenic systems in this moment. In particular, because as Emma has explained, one of the explanations I'm going to give you is that this multi-dimension of the ocean. So the way we value the oceans in a different way, oceans have different kind of, we interact with oceans in a very different way, and we allocate different values to oceans. So it's inevitable that we need to approach and look at forms of sustainable interaction with oceans from different angles. So an archaeologist, an historian, they can provide you, for example, information about how some narratives that Gustavo has explained, how they formed through time, what were the intentionalities, the rationalities. We can provide voices to vulnerable groups that have been historically neglected in the past. Also understanding the evolving nature of interactions between people and oceans, and those need multidisciplinary approaches. And they're also very important for all the colonization debates, of course. In terms of how do we move this at undergraduate and postgraduate level? This may sound quite obvious, but I think this is one of the key elements here. Research-led teaching, clearly, personal research-led teaching, and reassessing undergraduate and postgraduate curricula to try to create networks within, beyond our departments, within the universities. Very often faculties and departments, they don't talk. I work in a research institution in the University Autonomous of Barcelona, the ICTA, where we actually, one of our priorities is to connect with departments and take our research and bring to those departments in order to enhance the teaching and the learning experience there. And this necessarily requires a multidisciplinary approach. So I also think that I would recommend, this is the trajectory most of archaeologists trained in Europe, at least they do, is to engage also, whenever possible, with research projects beyond the expertise. Just be a little bit, assume some risk. Because it's true that going to a multidisciplinary arena, a student anyone a little bit feel that out of your comfort zone, you may have some crisis of identity. This is completely normal, but we need to create a pedagogic structure that start removing these feelings. And sometimes a little bit of this feeling is good, because if we always live within our comfort zone, perhaps we don't advance as much as we need. So I think, those are my reflections. I'm also very fortunate to lead a large research project here in Barcelona, in collaboration with several institutions in Brazil and in the UK. And our project is about looking at the development of fisheries in South America through time. And this is a truly interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary project. And I feel that I live completely out of my comfort zone. I've been living there in 3 years, connecting with historians, with economists, with environmental scientists. It has been an extremely enriching experience, and I invite all of you to give a try as well. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Well, hello. Thank you, Andre. This is Nimet Nafchi. I have an Arab name. I have a Mediterranean color of skin. My nationality is Mexican. I speak Spanish, and but somehow a big part of my heart is Brazilian. I'm going to talk in English because my Portuguese is not as good as it should. It is very exciting to be in this table. There's so much we can speak of regarding our main subject. I do want to repeat some of the things we have said before, especially what Patrick and Christine have already mentioned. I am sure I will politely disagree with my colleagues, especially with Gustavo, as I will not blame the problem on the epistemological imperialism attributed to positivism. And that's where I coincide with Patrick's opinion. There is, without any question, a part of the positive postulates like objective truth can only be reached through observation and experimentation. That is profoundly wrong. Don't understand me wrong. So scientists on the positivist agenda already know that things like beauty, virtue, and truth can also be found in dance, poetry, landscape architecture, or by looking at the smile of someone we love. We all know that. Concurrently, critical currents of thought, especially those in the postmodernist side, need to abandon radical negationist agendas. Yet, in any of these cases, the real problem has little to do, in my point of view, with the epistemological roots of the problem, but more with the politics of representation and the figures of power created through academic characters, theories, and postulates. If oceanographers, to put it otherwise, to place it with some other words, if oceanographers love the sea and coastal anthropologists rejoice in the company and teaching of fishers, then it is not far-fetched to think that oceanographers love fishing livelihoods as an extension of their love of the sea, and coastal anthropologists rejoice when coastal infrastructure is crafted under the premises of social and environmental justice. In short, we are not where we want to go in terms of the current levels of expertise and training of marine scientists within the humanities. But as Emma said before, we have started to emerge. 20 years ago, this conversation was not as strong or as common. I don't know if you hear the rain, but if my energy goes away, I'm in the middle of a tropical storm, so I apologize. 20 years ago, we couldn't have this conversation with such an intensity and with such an ubiquitous audience. But now that we have this conversation, I think that another problem is what we mean to decolonize research. I've always had a problem with this attempt to decolonize research, as they can easily be transformed into a new fashion of academic extractivism, an academic extractivism that promotes a sympathetic colonialism. So friendly approaches to exploit people and their resources. And I think these friendly approaches should still be called by their name. However, in order to decolonize oceanography, and this is, I think, the beauty of marine social sciences, that it brings tools from anthropology, for starts, we should keep insisting in occupying positions within the Earth and Life Sciences departments as social scientists, while actively engaging in discussions and collaboration with peoples in such departments, as Patrick once again just said. At the same time, we should listen and support the coastal people we work with and learn from in order to give a hand when needed. So, as students, you have to be aware that first big step towards decolonizing should be to convince science funding agencies, dissertation committees, etc., that in our craft, call it marine social sciences, social oceanography, or something else, it should be the people and not the researchers the ones proposing a research question. And this will normally have to do with solving a quotidian problem for coastal, to aid coastal livelihoods. Questions, for starts, my most deeply rooted interest is to know how people can detect marine medicines. What is the cognitive mechanism behind that? But so questions on how marine medicine works, what are the logics behind the use of wood and of one type of wood and not the other to make a canoe, or what are the adaptive capabilities of fishing communities in front of environmental shocks. This might be of great interest to funders and researchers alike. But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves if this is significant. This is my alarm, so my time is done. If this is significant in the greater order of things, to look at these questions without any community input. Thank you very much.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Debbie Vuelto. Voy a hablar en español para contribuir a esta diversidad lingüística y epistémica de este foro. Quiero agradecer a Gustavo Moura por su presentación e invitación a compartir en este espacio, y también a Emma por la fantástica presentación de su estudio. Yo no soy oceanógrafa, yo soy una mujer garífuna, negra. Garífuna es uno de los pueblos indígenas y afrodescendientes ubicado en toda la costa de Honduras, que es el país en el cual resido, ¿no? Y digo esto porque mi participación en este foro viene desde esta mirada, aunque también trabajo en la Universidad Nacional de Agricultura y eso también marca una mirada especial para mí, sobre todo en este día, 9 de septiembre, que se celebra el Día Internacional de la Agricultura. El pueblo del cual yo vengo sobrevive gracias a su relación costera, a su relación con la costa atlántica de mi país. Nosotros pues nos estamos distribuidos en 48 comunidades a lo largo de la costa atlántica de mi país, Honduras, y la actividad de subsistencia son la actividad marina, así como también la actividad de la agricultura. En ese sentido, y refiriéndome también a la presentación del profesor Gustavo, yo quiero abordar algunos aspectos que él mencionaba en su presentación. Si bien es cierto, reconocemos el avance histórico de la oceanografía clásica y todos los aportes, comparto con su presentación algunas características que es necesario ir desmontando con el objetivo de alimentar la discusión y favorecer la evolución de este campo científico. Uno de esos aspectos que yo quiero poner sobre la mesa es el totalitarismo epistémico. Y lo digo de esta manera porque si bien es cierto, tenemos una evolución de los términos, que como bien lo decía el profesor Nermer Narshi, no debemos caer en estas teorías cual si fueran una moda, sino que también analizarlas más profundamente en ese sentido. Y yo quiero plantear el tema del totalitarismo epistémico en el marco de una ciencia abierta y ver de qué manera la academia puede contribuir en el campo de la oceanografía social a la promoción y a la difusión de otras formas de saber, como lo planteaba el profesor Gustavo. Y digo esto porque si bien es cierto, al momento de realizar investigaciones o al momento de plantear algunas políticas curriculares en las carreras de oceanografía o las que tengan que ver con ella, haya existido una apertura para realizar investigaciones muy diversas, sí tenemos que reconocer que al momento de la difusión de esas investigaciones hay un formato que es casi único, y ese formato es la literatura que existe, ¿no? Que es de algún punto la validación del conocimiento que se ha obtenido a partir de estas investigaciones. Y la crítica en ese sentido viene en de qué manera nosotros podemos también ampliar ese formato y no solamente resumir a la cantidad de artículos publicados el conocimiento que es el válido o el que se ve en estas carreras. Es decir, de qué manera podemos entender nosotros el aporte de la tradición oral de los pueblos costeros, que ha sido además la forma por excelencia que han utilizado para transmitir sus conocimientos en torno a la medicina marina, a la relación con el mar, a aspectos que tienen que ver con la espiritualidad del mismo, y podemos nosotros tomar y implementar dentro de estas carreras también esta mirada no solamente sobre la literatura, sino sobre un término que podría ser como la oratura, es decir, todo lo que hay en materia de tradición oral respecto a las interpretaciones y relaciones con la costa, con el mar y con los océanos. Eso por un lado. Por otro lado, también quisiera yo poner sobre la mesa cómo estos conceptos que han de alguna manera primado dentro de estos campos científicos, estos conceptos de desarrollo de alguna manera chocan frontalmente con el concepto que en las comunidades costeras, al menos de mi país, nosotros tenemos en cuanto al mar. Si bien es cierto, en la costa atlántica Honduras tiene 820 kilómetros de zona costera entre la costa del Pacífico y la costa del Atlántico, que esta última es mayor, son 670 aproximadamente kilómetros de zona costera, en su mayoría ocupados por las comunidades garífunas que están en torno a ella. Si bien es cierto, nosotros entendemos de que el mar es de todos y es un derecho de los pueblos en general, ¿cómo podemos conciliar estas relaciones entre los conceptos hegemónicos de desarrollo y lo que nosotros entendemos por el desarrollo de una zona costera que viene en relación directa con algunos aspectos del cambio climático, con la no sobreexplotación de los recursos, con la conservación de los mismos, con la conservación también del paisaje y con estas relaciones básicas y elementales que nosotros tenemos, como algunas actividades que tienen que ver con la pesca artesanal. Cómo nosotros podemos también promover esto como un estado del desarrollo humano y social, que no solamente se tenga que concebir en materia de desarrollo aquello que tenga que ver con la sobreexplotación, ya sea turística, y de los recursos marinos, sino que podamos marcar como en un hito de la evolución del desarrollo también el aporte de la medicina marina, de la economía básica, de la relación directa y de la interpretación de esta manera de ver el mundo. Entonces, esos son los dos aspectos. Yo quiero compartir con Emma ese entusiasmo que ella tiene por este aspecto de la evolución de la discusión. Yo creo que también comparto ese optimismo porque el hecho de tener estos espacios y que nosotros podamos incorporar diferentes miradas a la contribución de esta discusión habla muy bien de cómo vamos avanzando en estos terrenos. Entonces, esa es mi participación. Espero, pues, en otros espacios contribuir y ampliar esta discusión. Muchas gracias.
Bom dia a todos, a todas e a todes. Vou falar em português. Primeiramente, gostaria de agradecer o convite para participar dessa mesa, nas pessoas, né, do Leopoldo e do Gustavo. E, bom, a minha perspectiva é uma perspectiva jurídica, né? Meu nome é Karina Oliveira, eu sou professora da Faculdade de Direito da Universidade de Brasília. A minha formação ela é bem disciplinar, graduação, mestrado e doutorado em Direito. Mas como o meu tema de pesquisa é ambiental, é internacional, naturalmente eu tenho tanto abertura quanto curiosidade para trabalhar de uma forma multidisciplinar, interdisciplinar e transdisciplinar, né? Eu vou dividir minha apresentação aqui em duas partes, uma parte um pouco formal e uma segunda parte um pouco mais substancial, para engajar no diálogo, né? A parte formal, ela está conectada ao contexto bem brasileiro, né? Da conexão entre as ciências sociais aplicadas, as ciências humanas, linguística, artes, e as ciências do mar, né? Eu diria que no Brasil, formalmente, né, apenas em 2020, o Plano Setorial para os Recursos do Mar, né, que é um decreto normalmente publicado para pensar na política relacionada às ciências do mar, só o Plano Setorial de 2020 que inseriu uma definição mais precisa da conexão entre as ciências naturais e as ciências sociais aplicadas, humanas, nas ciências do mar, né? Então, eu diria que no Brasil, essa conexão formal, ela é recente, ela foi feita no âmbito da CIRM, né, que é a Comissão Interministerial para os Recursos do Mar, no contexto do Programa de Formação de Recursos Humanos, PPG-MAR, de uma forma mais institucionalizada, né? Ou seja, essa data de 2020 ela é emblemática porque é claro que todo esse movimento de conexão formal, né, entre as áreas, ele ocorre há muitos anos, né, e ocorria há muitos anos, e ele foi constatado normativamente, né, nessa data depois de uma grande batalha de várias pessoas, né, que se engajaram para que isso ocorresse formalmente. E por que eu digo que essa formalização foi importante? Porque antes disso há uma constatação bastante evidente que até um dos papéis de um GT que foi recentemente criado, um grupo de trabalho recentemente criado para fazer a conexão entre essas áreas, né, uma identificação de pouquíssimo fomento institucional das agências de fomento brasileiras, né, nas áreas de humanidades de modo geral, na conexão de editais de pesquisa com essas áreas, né, e, de certa forma, até um pensamento, né, estrutural, político, que pudesse fazer com que existisse um pouco mais de horizontalidade nas cooperações entre ciências sociais aplicadas, vou chamar de humanidades, né, e as ciências naturais, né? Então, nesse sentido, tanto a formação dos recursos humanos, a formação, a pesquisa, a extensão, todas essas atividades, elas, nas áreas das humanidades, né, elas têm pouquíssimo fomento, então há poucos programas de pós-graduação, por exemplo, na área de direito, totalmente dedicadas às ciências do mar. Então estamos numa fase, dentro das humanidades, ainda bastante embrionária de consolidação de espaços formais para a formação, né, né, de juristas engajados nas ciências do mar, antropólogos engajados nas ciências do mar. E por que eu digo isso? Essa visão é disciplinar, mas ela é basilar para que exista uma horizontalidade de pesquisadores, né, de pessoas com uma formação disciplinar. Aqui eu não estou na transdisciplinariedade ainda, eu estou disciplinar mesmo. Para que exista uma horizontalidade de comunicação entre as áreas, é necessário que exista esse fomento inicial dessas áreas para que existam pesquisadores formados nessa perspectiva, né, disciplinar para passar para o multi, para o inter e para o trans. Então, eu diria que no Brasil é tudo ainda muito embrionário, e para que essa construção não seja feita como foi construída inicialmente, né, trazendo uma definição de ciências do mar única e exclusivamente pensada para ciências naturais, agora, né, nesse âmbito formal, lá no PPG-MAR, a ideia é construir desde o início esse diagnóstico de quem somos, onde estamos, né, quem pesquisa sobre isso, em complementaridade, né, às pessoas que já fazem isso há muito tempo de uma forma interdisciplinar, ou seja, pessoas formadas com formações, né, graduação, mestrado ou doutorado, ou passando para transdisciplinariedade, sociedade civil de um modo geral, né, que elas, desde o início, possam seguir alguns princípios, né, dentro desse âmbito, que seriam princípios de diversidade, equidade e inclusão. E, nesse sentido, essa ideia, né, dentro lá do PPG-MAR, de criar, em 2021, um grupo de trabalho em humanidades, tem essa perspectiva de trazer, né, incluir todo mundo, as pessoas que têm interesse nas humanidades de modo geral, independentemente da sua formação, né, para que a gente dialogue e faça um diagnóstico construtivo dessa situação brasileira, né, e depois pense em formas de aprimorar. Aí agora, meu segundo ponto, que eu prometo que vai durar 1 minuto, eu gostaria de lançar aqui algumas ideias, né, sobre essa reflexão na formação, na reflexão dessas conexões, né? E eu diria que dois pontos que já foram levantados, né? O ponto da linguagem, então, um trabalho disciplinar mesmo de simplificar a linguagem. Então, eu tenho alguns exemplos de atividades que eu tenho tentado desenvolver, que tentam traduzir dissertações, teses de doutorado para uma linguagem mais simples, engajada com a sociedade, né? Gostei muito da sugestão sobre as perguntas de problemas de pesquisa conectados a perguntas da sociedade, né, para que a gente possa fazer a interface, né, essa transdisciplinariedade que a sociedade traga as perguntas. Então, para isso, a gente precisa simplificar as linguagens, né, para comunicar. Então, esse é um primeiro ponto. E um segundo ponto, né, que eu queria engajar nas falas, nas duas principais falas, né, desse seminário, é a seguinte, né, eu tenho uma perspectiva bastante, vamos dizer, institucional, bastante conectada um pouco ao que a Emma falou sobre um olhar positivo para movimentos internacionais, como, por exemplo, a década da ciência oceânica, né? Mas, claro, com o controle que o Gustavo manifestou no sentido, por exemplo, né, de não replicar uma perspectiva mais totalitarista, né? Então, por exemplo, eu discordo de chamar a década do oceano, né? Eu acho que é década dos oceanos, é década, sim, da ciência oceânica, ok, mas década dos oceanos, né? Há vários oceanos, há várias perspectivas, há particularidades regionais, locais, que devem ser levadas em consideração, né? Para que exista, de fato, uma inclusão, mas eu acho que esses movimentos internacionais, sim, eles permitem, né, que esse tema venha à tona, exista mais financiamento, exista mais contato entre as pessoas, né, para uma construção conjunta desses temas, né? Então, eu paro por aqui e eu diria, né, só um último comentário para responder a uma observação do Patrick, né, do Patrick, que eu não acho que as ciências, aqui no caso sociais aplicadas, né, na minha perspectiva do direito, queiram se isolar ou se isolem ou vejam de uma forma crítica, né? Eu acho que há muitos e muitos pesquisadores que trabalham de modo aplicado, tentam se conectar, porém há sob a perspectiva brasileira, um desnível ainda muito grande de formação de pessoas nessas áreas, para que elas possam dialogar de modo horizontal. Então, a batalha é, sim, num primeiro momento, por uma ação afirmativa para essas áreas, para que exista um corpo pensante de pessoas formadas nos mais diversos níveis, né? Eu falo de nível, claro, eu estou no âmbito da formação superior, né? Mas é claro que a gente pode integrar sob diversas perspectivas, e quando essa horizontalidade estiver de fato estabelecida, né? Aí sim a gente pode falar que há uma capacidade de comunicação igual entre todas as áreas, vamos dizer assim. Mas, claro, sempre incluindo desde a origem, né, princípios como diversidade, equidade e inclusão. É isso.
Obrigado, Karina. Thank you, Karina, and all commentators for a brilliant and thought-provoking series of interventions. And I'll now move to our final section of the webinar, and that will be the contributions from students. So Gustavo's students, this is the first time in Brazil that a decolonial coastal management course within the oceanography program is offered in University of Pará, Federal University of Pará. And so his students have split in groups some days ago, and each one of the 4 groups have posed one question. So you have now the opportunity for commentators to chip in, to jump in and contribute with about 2 minutes of final thoughts. You can either pick 1, 2, or so provide some response to the students' questions. So I'll just read them here. So the first one, what are the main challenges faced when debating social oceanography in the Northern and Southern Hemisphere? What are the means to decolonize oceanography in Brazil and in other countries? How can the interaction between the social sciences and oceanography expand professional and work opportunities? And what should environmental consulting firms employing marine social scientists do to safeguard professional ethics by preventing harm to natural resources and local communities? Some of these questions have already been touched upon, some are new, so we'll follow the same sequence of commentators. So starting with Michelle, welcome, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I will be taking on kind of questions 1 and 2 together, and drawing upon all these extraordinary, valuable, and brilliant commentary by all the people I've had the good fortune to share with this morning. In terms of decolonizing social oceanography, I think it's very important to look onto Debbie's extraordinarily articulate and valuable contribution in this aspect. And I would like to talk a little bit more about this from my perspective, which is very different, which is as a researcher, and specifically in the area of sea turtle conservation, which is an area where there can often be a lot of tension between the goals of academics or the goals of conservationists and communities. And in my case, an important part of what I do is try to put myself at the service of the community, knowing that the goals and aims could be very different. And my work is essentially to be at the service of the community. The community wants there to be sea turtles in the future, but they may want it for very different reasons than the conservationists might want, or that academics or scientists might want. So that basically requires a process of kind of putting our preconceptions on their head and trying to understand things from a different point of view. Training in anthropology is certainly a place to start in this. And I think a big part in the future, looking at curricula, is trying to help natural science have a training where they can look at things through an intercultural lens, or put themselves in the shoes of the communities, at the service of the communities who indeed should be thinking of the research questions. And also, as Debbie was saying, if there's this primacy of literature as the key way to transmit information, how do we value, and also how do we expand into these other sources of guarding and safekeeping and transmitting different forms of knowledge, that including the oral tradition, but also how can we also, as Karina was saying in her intervention, how do we translate science into formats, oh, sorry, it's my timer, and translate science in a way that is accessible to the general public, so we can keep a dialogue that's a two-way street. I think that's a very important thing. We need to make sure the dialogue is always going in both directions, but also we as researchers making sure that we're working, keeping in mind that the community's self-determination is the primary principle of engagement, and always having that kind of first and foremost. So I will stop there. Thank you.
So I'm interested in addressing the second question about what it means to decolonize oceanography in Brazil and other countries, and just more broadly the idea of decolonization of academic disciplines in general is an interesting question to me. I think that this would require, kind of broader shifts in institutional levels as well as societal levels. So institutions of higher learning and in research norms and in the culture of academic institutions in order to make space available for multiple ways of knowing, and the convergence of these multiple ways of knowing, these multiple knowledges through meaningful forms of collaboration. So some of the things like the idea of the learning networks and peer-to-peer learning and story telling initiatives that Patrick was talking about. I'm really interested in learning more about these kinds of initiatives that are happening in other universities and institutions around the world. For example, I'm connecting with you all today from the University of Maine, which is located on Marsh Island, the homeland of the Penobscot Nation, where issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment on sacred sites are ongoing. And this is part of our land acknowledgement that the university formally recognizes the Penobscot Nation and other Wabanaki tribal nations as distinct and sovereign. And one of the things that I enjoy being part of this university community here is I have wonderful colleagues, Darren Branco, Brady McGreevy, John Daigle, Anthony Sutton, many others, that have been working to address some of these issues of power and justice in the scholarship of sustainability science in the areas of river restoration and dam removal and shellfish management. And a lot of this is transdisciplinary work, not interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary work, because there is that distinction that kind of has grown out of these 2 decades of efforts to improve relationships between the university and Native communities. And I'm very interested in, kind of how these similar types of initiatives are playing out in other areas. There's my timer.
Hello, everybody. So just to remark on some of the excellent questions that came from the students. So I guess one thing I want to say is that I recognize that maybe some of the things I said earlier were a bit provocative, and it's built on a desire for positive change. I'm in the College of the Environment at the University of Washington, which has hundreds of faculty members focused on environmental issues. There are within that college hundreds of biophysical scientists and only a dozen social scientists within the college. That needs to change, and I'm constantly demanding change for that with the dean's office, et cetera. So I'm not ignorant of the imbalances, but I also, as a person who personally mainly self-identifies as an environmental sociologist, even though I have some natural science training at the graduate level, I want us within this applied social scientists to also look at opportunities what we can do to foster bridge building with people in the natural biophysical sciences. I have a joint appointment also in a international studies program, and I sense some reticence to work or some disinterest to work across the disciplinary boundaries. And so that's interesting to me. We can critique the biophysical scientists and their sort of self-assuredness and the sort of how they occupy the space, as well as we can look at what needs to change within the applied social scientists realm. For students, my recommendation for decolonizing might be again, to reiterate that students have agency and power. And if they don't, to change their institution, they can create power by networking, by fostering student-to-student-led initiatives that will force change within their own institution. And I really believe as well, students should be demanding that they have the opportunity to directly work with communities. For example, Panelmar in Brazil, or other learning networks that exist around the world that engage many non-academic people. We as academics, as students, should be trying to foster those networks and how we can bring our work to bear and to support them. The last thing I would just identify is I'm increasingly engaged in digital storytelling. I think is a very powerful medium. Many young people, everybody has one of these damn things in their pockets. You can create stories on it. You can create videos. You don't have to, you can leapfrog into social media and create really interesting stories with people that are not like yourselves. I'm doing such with University of Washington students and young Indigenous students, and it's really a lot of fun. And we're able to create powerful narratives about how Indigenous people are leading ocean sustainability where I live. Thank you very much.
Aloha. Thank you. It's great to follow you, Patrick, because I think I have similar things to say about student agency. I had a colleague say to me before that the jobs we want don't exist today. And I'm telling you as students that this is your time to learn the skills, to expand your ideas and your ways of understanding the ocean, learn those methods, and create those jobs of the future where we'll have decolonial oceans, where we will have areas of equality and justice, where we'll be able to grow food for our people, and recognize the knowledge that they bring to these spaces. I also love these questions on what are the main challenges facing these different areas. And one is that recognition of we all love the ocean, yet the stories we tell are different. And stories are the way that humans have always learned and shared their knowledge. And so the more ways that we can share our knowledge, if it's through mobile technologies, if it's through learning networks, if it's through creating more spaces where the stories of our oceans can be shared, it's in those stories that we start to decolonize the mind and decolonize the ways we interact with our ocean. In the class that I teach called Pono Science, which is about decolonizing ethical marine research. It's focused on graduate students, but I love working with students because you guys will change the future. It's your interactions, it's your conversations and discussions that change the faculty's moods, which change the directions of the university. At the University of Hawaii, there is a big push for the university to become a Native Hawaiian place of learning, to recognize the Indigenous knowledge that is created in those spaces. But it's a hard fight, and it takes people with that disciplinary background. So while you're a student, this is the time to give yourself all those tools to succeed, and you are the ones who will make a bright and healthy ocean for us in the future. Thank you.
Hello. I don't know if you can see me. Can you hear me?
Te oímos, André.
Vale. Bueno, vou falar em português assim para dar mensagem principalmente para os estudantes de graduação e pós-graduação, principalmente no Brasil. Principalmente no Brasil, desde uma perspectiva histórica. Eu achei interessante que emergiu nesse evento, muitas vezes, a questão da construção histórica da memória, das narrativas, né? Então, isso tem claramente uma conexão com o passado. Então, diretamente para estudantes, por exemplo, da área de arqueologia, da área de história, estudantes que reconstroem com diferentes fontes, com diferentes materiais, a história dessas interações entre grupos humanos e ambientes naturais e antropizados, a minha recomendação, e em relação à pergunta número 3, são duas em particular. A primeira é, de modo muito simples, conectar diretamente com outras disciplinas através de leituras e grupos de trabalho, ler, ler e ler, além do campo de vocês, ler além do campo específico, e tentar, que é a minha segunda sugestão, bem simples para iniciar, sem grandes complicações, buscar quais são as grandes lacunas, os grandes desafios, os grandes gaps nessas disciplinas, nesses outros campos de saber, que a sua contribuição específica, a sua contribuição, por exemplo, na história, pode se encaixar. Eu vou dar um exemplo da Marine Historical Ecology, né, ecologia histórica marinha, para os meus colegas do Brasil, arqueólogos, onde que tem a capacidade de abrir uma janela no passado para esses ambientes costeiros e oceânicos que os cientistas de hoje muitas vezes não têm essa capacidade de entender, por exemplo, como podemos, através de dados históricos, dados arqueológicos, contribuir a questões de conservação biológica, restauração ecológica, com referências de base, não reference baseline. Então, também um pouco despertar esse interesse dentro das humanidades, de tentar conectar e dar a sua contribuição, alavancar elementos que somente as ciências humanas pode dar, dentro desses grandes desafios que a gente está enfrentando em relação aos oceanos e aos ambientes costeiros e as sociedades que dependem e se relacionam com eles. Então, esses são duas simples sugestões, e eu agradeço novamente aos organizadores e a experiência enriquecedora de estar aqui.
Well, for me, all questions are very interesting, but I think I'm gonna accost question number 1, and what are the main challenges faced when debating sociolography in the northern and southern hemispheres? I think that the main challenge is to really define who is in the global north and who is in the global south. From my colleagues here, talking from territorial rights in Maine to Hawaiian ways of teaching, to other places and spaces that have to be again occupied by different people, different than the usual suspects. There is a need to recognize that there is also a global south within the global north, to put it blatantly. What we knew before as the left, which is now the progressive wing of politics, has been splitted between people that fight for territorial rights, for demands of artisan agriculturalists and fishers, sexual and gender identity and rights fights. We have to realize that this progressive bloc is a bloc, and that all of these different struggles cannot be different, so cannot be separate. So again, for seeing what is the main challenge faced when debating social oceanography is to realize who is oppressed and who is subject of exploitation and dispossession. There is a large periphery, and we need to figure out what the core is. Where is this coming from? As has happened before with the history of ocean exploration, capitalism is behind everything, and capitalism has to do with the spatial fix that we are actually suffering through this decade of ocean science for sustainable development. So that is the main challenge. Thank you.
Muy bien, voy a partir de un punto que considero muy importante y es la capacidad estudiantil de poder generar las preguntas. No importa si nosotros no podemos responderlas, importa que ustedes estén haciendo las preguntas, porque eso significa que estamos entrando a una etapa más profunda del análisis y que estamos reflexionando sobre nuestro propio quehacer dentro y fuera de la academia. Es este espíritu estudiantil que hay que fomentar y hay que promover, porque a partir de ahí es que se pueden generar los cambios necesarios en algunas estructuras tradicionalmente estáticas dentro de esta forma de conocer. Quiero referirme medianamente a la segunda pregunta, porque al igual que Michelle en su intervención, considero importante incorporar otras formas de saber. En ese sentido, yo quiero referirme a un aspecto que se tiende en la academia. Son dos, básicamente. Uno es esa tendencia a complejizar el conocimiento a partir de las formas tradicionales de concebirlo y de expresarlo y de promoverlo. Cuando nosotros realizamos investigaciones, estas investigaciones generalmente vienen de la academia a las comunidades y nunca nos hemos preguntado cómo las comunidades entienden la academia o entienden el Estado y las políticas. Por lo tanto, la investigación creo que como una forma de incorporar otros saberes, descolonizar el conocimiento y también de democratizar la ciencia, tenemos que partir del hecho de qué es lo que también las comunidades quieren saber de las formas en que nosotros tenemos de concebir dentro de la academia el conocimiento. Y otra es, dentro también de este escenario de la complejización del conocimiento, ir tratando otros mecanismos más acordes a la forma que tienen los distintos sectores de interpretar, de conocer y de comunicar. En este sentido, yo quisiera también devolver una pregunta a los estudiantes y es de qué manera ustedes conciben que comprenden mejor el conocimiento, ¿sí? ¿De qué manera conciben ustedes de que el aprendizaje es más significativo dentro de estos escenarios? Porque no siempre la manera en que se está promoviendo en las políticas curriculares es la forma en que ustedes están aprendiendo mejor. Porque si nosotros nos hacemos esa pregunta y esa reflexión, nosotros podemos desmontar algunas estructuras y a la hora de presentarnos, hacerlo de una forma mucho más horizontal y entender que la otra forma o las otras perspectivas también son igualmente válidas e igualmente dignas, aunque no vengan en estos formatos tradicionalmente promovidos dentro de la academia. Otro aspecto muy importante, y en este quiero cerrar, es que nosotros hemos entendido la difusión del conocimiento a través del número de publicaciones que alguien tenga sobre el resultado de muchas de sus estudios. Si bien es cierto, esta forma es como esa medida que nosotros tenemos de conocer la profundización que alguien ha hecho a partir de los estudios. No debemos caer en el entendido de que solo a través de las publicaciones que se han hecho en revistas y en grandes plataformas de difusión científica es que nosotros podemos acceder al conocimiento. No quiero con esto tampoco dejar la idea de que esto no es importante, de que no es necesario. Es igualmente importante, es igualmente necesario, pero no es lo único. Por lo tanto, la conversación, el intercambio horizontal también son formas muy ricas de saber, de conocer y que nosotros debemos ampliar y debemos sobre todo validar y poner en igualdad de condiciones que las otras formas de adquisición y difusión del conocimiento. Una vez más, muchas gracias por la invitación.
Bom, eu vou tentar contribuir com a resposta da pergunta 3, né? Então, a interação entre as áreas. E, claro, existem etapas, né, nessa integração, e eu diria que existe primeiro a etapa do possível e depois do ideal, né? Eu vou ficar na etapa do possível, no Brasil especificamente, né? Uma resposta para os alunos aqui no Brasil. Eu acredito que estamos num momento bastante favorável a essas interações, né? E tanto sob uma perspectiva do preparo da sociedade civil, quanto das diversas áreas do conhecimento para se comunicarem, né? E o GT Humanidades, no âmbito do PPG-MAR, tem uma missão de diagnosticar, né, o que está sendo feito nessas áreas. Então, a partir disso, eu acho que essa base de dados poderá auxiliar os estudantes a buscarem projetos de pesquisa, tanto nas suas instituições quanto em outras instituições, projetos de extensão, nos quais eles possam participar, né? Então, o meu incentivo é que vocês busquem projetos de pesquisa, busquem projetos de extensão, se conectem a essas atividades, que eu acredito que atualmente, né, são os locais nos quais há uma cocriação, co-design de métodos que possam aperfeiçoar essas interações, né? Então, valorizar os métodos de todas as áreas, né? Eu acho que, né, cada área do conhecimento tem os seus métodos, então, no primeiro momento, precisamos conhecer os métodos uns dos outros, e os alunos são parte disso, né? E o segundo caminho é co-design, né, co-construir métodos que possam fazer a interface entre essas áreas. E eu acho que o âmbito desses projetos, né, mais ainda do que disciplinas, etc., mas esses projetos que, no caso dos projetos de extensão, conectam a sociedade civil também, essas perguntas podem ser construídas em conjunto e a participação dos alunos é fundamental. Então, eu acredito que toda essa batalha institucional para conseguir mais financiamento para esse tipo de projeto interdisciplinar, transdisciplinar, é fundamental para que exista realmente um diagnóstico, que as pessoas se conectem e que, a partir disso, né, nos microcosmos, né, da construção do conhecimento, isso possa ser feito tanto de cima para baixo quanto de baixo para cima, né? E o ideal será um dia teremos uma horizontalidade entre o conhecimento formal, o conhecimento informal, entre arranjos formais, arranjos informais, e que, mas esse ainda é o ideal. A gente tem que, né, peça por peça, construir esse co-design. É isso.
Thank you, all commentators. I would straight away give the floor to Gustavo and Emma for the final wrap-up remarks from the Global North and Global South.
Oi, me ouve?
Sim.
Bom, obrigado a todos e a todas pelas falas. É muito bom ouvi-los, né? Eu fiz várias anotações aqui. Eu acho que a gente tem, claro, várias discordâncias, mas vários pontos em comuns também. Eu vejo aqui que um dos pontos em comuns que eu gostaria de comentar seria que todo mundo aqui, no caso, é a favor desse diálogo entre diferentes modos de saber, né? Seja eles dentro de diferentes campos do conhecimento científico, ou seja eles com os conhecimentos tradicionais ou de outros grupos sociais subalternizados. Só que o meu ponto nessa questão é que justamente esse diálogo, né, com as ciências humanas, das ciências naturais com as ciências humanas, ou vice-versa, ou até com os conhecimentos tradicionais, ele não resolve por si só fazer o diálogo, né? A gente cairia, na verdade, numa cantinela de sereia, dizer que somente com esse diálogo, né, entre conhecimentos, entre modos de saber, já se resolveriam os problemas, por exemplo, de defesa de direitos humanos dos povos tradicionais, né? Por exemplo, ou que a gente ampliaria a diversidade epistemológica do mundo. Eu acho que esse trabalho de identificar as bases da oceanografia clássica, né, enquanto um modo que foi construído, inclusive, com diálogo com outras ciências humanas, é um alerta, na verdade, de que não basta só fazer esse diálogo com outros modos de conhecer, seja eles as ciências humanas, ou seja, inclusive, com conhecimento tradicional, entre ciência e conhecimento tradicional. Na verdade, o que a gente precisa ficar em alerta são quais são as bases epistemológicas e as tensões, na verdade, político-epistêmicas que estão por trás da formulação desse diálogo de saberes. Né? E aí, entrando um pouco pela fala do Nemer também, que tem tanta base epistemológica, que seria um problema a ser resolvido, mas quais são as questões políticas que estão tentando ser resolvidas a partir desse diálogo também. Né? Então, acho que pensar seria um pouco, eu acredito que seja um pouco pueril, assim, acreditar que só o diálogo com ciências humanas, como se elas todas fossem boazinhas, como se a antropologia evolucionista não tivesse tido seu papel, por exemplo, na justificativa do nazismo, na organização dos museus de histórias naturais durante esse período, por exemplo, como se os economistas não tivessem papéis no governo Trump ou no governo Bolsonaro. Né? Então, não é, na verdade, o diálogo simplesmente com as ciências humanas que vai resolver o problema, na verdade, das estruturas epistemológicas da oceanografia clássica. E, claro, eu estou falando de uma ciência oceânica, né, que é a oceanografia clássica. Eu não estou falando da antropologia da pesca, por exemplo, da antropologia marítima, da sociologia, eu não estou falando de outros, né, das ciências de outras, da geografia marinha, né, eu não estou falando dessas outras ciências, eu estou falando especificamente de uma, que inclusive quando faz o diálogo com diferentes profissionais em projetos interdisciplinares, a ordem do discurso que se cria a partir dessa lógica, ela atende a essas 5 estruturas que eu demonstrei aqui. Né? Agora, uma outra questão que eu pontuar rapidamente, que eu acho que já deu tempo, é a questão também do acordo com relação às décadas dos oceanos. Né? Eu acho, sim, que é uma oportunidade muito interessante a questão da década dos oceanos, só que o meu problema não é com a década dos oceanos, inclusive, principalmente se fizer articulação do Objetivo de Desenvolvimento Sustentável 14 e 16, né, que seria a vida marinha com a questão da defesa de direitos humanos, ou a DS5, que é a questão de gênero, algo que eu não vejo no kit pedagógico. O meu problema, na verdade, não é com a década do oceano, é com o kit pedagógico. E aí eu lanço uma pergunta, né? Se, por exemplo, numa situação que a gente teve de risco pandêmico, quando médicos que não eram da especialidade de estudos de pandemia ou de vírus, eles resolveram sair falando, né, em vários países, inclusive aqui no Brasil, dando opiniões sobre como tratar a pandemia, se isso nos chocou, por que é que profissionais que nunca estudaram cultura ou, né, não têm formação pedagógica, eles são alçados a produzir um kit pedagógico como o do Cultura Oceânica, num contexto de crise climática, num contexto de crise ambiental, e isso a nós não nos choca. Por que isso não nos choca, sendo que a situação da pandemia nos chocou? As pessoas que estão nessa comissão intergovernamental de oceanografia da ONU, que fizeram esse kit pedagógico, nenhum deles tem formação e publica sobre cultura. Eles utilizam, inclusive, entre as 100 conceitos, mais de 100 conceitos que existem de cultura, eles usam a cultura como sinônimo de grau de instrução, que é justamente um conceito médio, um conceito de senso comum do que significa cultura. Né? Então, eu acho que isso deveria nos chocar, né? Assim como nos chocou os médicos que não tinham formação para tratar da questão da pandemia. Era isso que eu queria dizer. Obrigado.
Thank you. So firstly, I would just like to say how inspired and excited I am by all of the incredibly passionate and thoughtful interventions that we've heard from today. It's been a really fantastic 2.5 hours, so thank you so much for that. Firstly, I'd like to invite Gustavo to be involved in the conversations around ocean literacy and the kit. Get involved, come and talk to us. I wasn't involved in the kit, but I know some of the people who were, and yeah, that's a call, right? I totally agree with you, and I think that's something that we can challenge and we can do better at. So please do. It would be great to have further conversations about that. I have a couple of thoughts, really based on so many incredible statements that were made. I fully echo the calls to go beyond our ivory towers of academia and to really embrace that transdisciplinarity that we've heard talked about by so many people. I think we heard a lot of messages about challenging the status quo, and one of the comments that came up a couple of times was about students absolutely having agency and being empowered to create change within their disciplines and within ocean research. But I would also like to challenge us, those of us who are further in our careers and who are perhaps have different types of power within those structures, to challenge ourselves to continue pushing back against the status quo, that just because things have been as they are for a while doesn't mean that's how they have to stay. And I think while the young, incredible marine scientists who, of all disciplines, who will continue to come up through various ways of training, need our support. So we need to make sure that we don't get too comfortable and that we are uncomfortable and we challenge the status quo, and we demand that change for ourselves. There was a lot of really interesting discussion on depending on literature as ways of, as a valued source of knowledge and a valued source of information. And I think that's inherent within academia. We publish, right? That's what we do. But wouldn't it be great if some of our journals published different things? Like, so moved away from the standard academic paper and published poetry, and we heard about orality, so published stories. We've heard about how we connect people is by it's stories. So I just wonder if there's something, Patrick, maybe that's something that we can talk about. I think it'd be great to think about how we can challenge that. And yes, I've seen your comment, absolutely, feel constructively uncomfortable. I think that's a very good point. Yes, absolutely. And I just think it's been so fantastic to hear so many ideas of being brave and innovative and being open to new ideas and being critical of ourselves, and I guess not critical in a bad way, constructively critical, always pushing for better. And that's really what I've felt inspired by throughout this whole session, that optimism and that desire to continue challenging ourselves, our disciplines, and how we continue to push these this disciplinary growth forward is incredibly encouraging. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of such an absolutely enriching conversation, and I look forward to speaking to you all again at some point. So Leo, I'll hand over to you to close.
Thanks so much for wrapping up so quickly and neatly, and so encompassing of all the perspective resonated within the call. Emma, Gustavo, thank you so much for your leadership in the panels. Thank you all panelists and commentators for such a thrilling and mind-blowing series of commentaries. The thoughts shared here today were certainly super theoretically rich, but also we collected very practical ideas and examples of how to decolonize marine social sciences when engaging with ocean citizens and stewards to exchange knowledges. I thought personally this webinar would be a great appetizer, food for thought, but it has been almost an entire meal filled with provocations that will certainly keep us thinking today as we resume our routines. Whenever we are in the global south and north, and as Nemer said, as we confront the south in the north and the north in the south. We look forward to come back to you as soon as possible with a summary report of the ideas shared here today and ideas of potential next steps for networking. If you have not done so, please fill the webinar registration form so we can reach you out with a copy of this report. So now I'm going to share just a final slide here. So this is for echoing our panelists and commentators that students have agency. That's very important perspective. This is very timely. And we'd like to advertise this questionnaire for Brazilian oceanography students only. And we will share the link with you by email, so you can contribute directly with the policies being thought by the working group on ocean humanities that Karina spoke about. Also, for everyone, please fill a short evaluation form, which will hopefully pop up in your browser once you finish the webinar. Also, feel free to provide your insights on the questions posed by oceanography students, and we'll make sure they are included in the final webinar report to be shared with you soon. They will be available in this short survey. Finally, I thank the Oceanography Society, the Marine Social Science Network, Federal University of Pará, Oceano Vista, Painel Mar, and the Working Group on Ocean Humanities, the CoLab, and everyone involved. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, everyone, for this insightful couple of hours, and have a great day and weekend. Thank you. If panelists want to open the camera to say cheers. Also, we're gonna interrupt the transmission soon. Obrigado a todos, obrigado, e até mais. Thank you. We will get back to you soon.
Obrigado, valeu.
Obrigada.
Chao, gracias.
Obrigada.